Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Lineup. I am Joshua Adams, and as always, I'm joined by Jeffrey Matthews and Christensen. Batting leadoff in the lineup today is arbitration and the ugly process that it is for the players. Second, MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred finally got some of his pace of play rules set for the 2018 season. Yay. Third, we have the rise of the six-man pitching rotation, and then MLB Network released their top 100 players in the game today. In some places we agree, and in others not so much, specifically with you. Finally, on green light, Tim Tebow is still a professional baseball player, and the owner of the Mets even goes so far as to say Tebow will play in the major leagues at some point. But first, here is Jeff with Quick Pitch and the latest in APSU softball.
Alrighty, softball. They haven't played yet. They're playing this Friday at 9 a.m. They're heading down to Conway, Arkansas for the Central Arkansas Invitational. Their first matchup is going to be against Louisiana Monroe. And they're playing Central Arkansas, Kansas, South Dakota State, and Boise State, and that's taking place between the 23rd is when it starts, and then they're going to wrap that up on the 25th, which is the Sunday. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it right now for softball. And so, Christian, what you got for baseball?
Well, baseball played yesterday, and as you guys know, they started actually pretty successful. The Govs went 3-0 last weekend. They did get wins against South Dakota State and then Illinois as well, so a Big Ten school. That's not too bad, but yesterday was rough. The Salukis of Southern Illinois came in and beat the Governors 17-6, and it was rough, guys. 5 total home runs in the game, though. The wind was definitely blowing out, and once a fly ball was up, it immediately seemed like it was gone. And but yesterday, Nick Walker, the center fielder for Austin Peay, did end up with 2 home runs alone, so that was pretty solid, but the rest of the team could not hang together. Govs couldn't get it done. They do play again coming up, though, this weekend. They'll be at home for all 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they'll play Toledo. So that's all we have in Governors baseball so far.
All right, so our first topic is arbitration, and arbitration stinks. For those of you who don't know, which included me until recent years, Fangraphs defines arbitration as this. Up until players have acquired 3 seasons of service time, their salary is determined solely by their team. For years 3 through 6, players can take their salary demands to an arbitration panel if they can't reach an agreement with their team. So there winds up being a disagreement, and it causes the teams to say bad things about the players to the players in front of a third party, giving reasons why they are not worth this much, and it's just can be demoralizing for the players.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I actually decided to take some time and do a little more research onto what arbitration actually does for the players. And considering, like you said, they do have to sit in front of that third party, it's a little rough for both sides, because then you start to hear the positives and the negatives and exactly how they feel about each other. That being said, they do end up taking it into consideration, and that's how they come up with those final numbers. Now, the committee doesn't actually get to make a happy medium. They do have to pick either the team's offer or the player's offer in arbitration. A lot of people think that eventually they find that happy medium. No, they have to pick one of the two to come up with that final number. Spent a lot of time reading up on that. So definitely causes quite a few issues with those teams and players.
Something how I look at it for baseball is it's kind of like a review at work. You basically come up to your boss, the organization, and you say, I think I'm worth this much to you, and I think I should be paid this much. Their boss, the organization, can say no. And then at that point, if you have a disagreement, then you have to go to that panel. And I think it's definitely hard for some players to sit there and basically be told that they're not worth as much as they feel that they are worth, which definitely puts a toll on the relationship, I think, between the player and the organization. And I think moving on, some players might have grudges moving on. I think some of them might get over it, and they might just be like, you know what, okay, that's fine. But at this point, sometimes I feel like that relationship could go to crumbles if it's bad enough.
Dellin Betances, just a couple years ago, he grew up watching the Yankees. He grew up loving the Yankees, and he made the Yankees, reaching a childhood dream. And then he was taken to arbitration, and afterwards he said, they take me in a room and they trash me for about an hour and a half. I thought that wasn't fair. I felt like I've done a lot for this organization, especially over the last 3 years. So, it just leads to a lot of hurt feelings. Marcus Stroman just a few days ago tweeted about how upset he was. But later he also said that the Blue Jays handled it as professionally as you possibly can. So
Yeah.
there are good arbitration hearings, and there are arbitration hearings like that lead to upset players
Yeah.
that are fine with leaving afterwards.
Well, there's also the guys that they get so close to meeting that point with the team, and like a couple examples that we talked about, even just $100,000 in court fees away,
Yeah.
and that became an issue too. So I'll let you guys take that one because.
So I'll go ahead and grab it. Mike Foltzovic of the Atlanta Braves. I think he wanted $2,300,000. The Atlanta Braves came back at $2,200,000. They had to go to arbitration for that. Foltzovic lost that battle, and so he will be receiving $2.2 million. But something that definitely, I think, brightened up his day. His son was actually born a few hours later after that meeting. So I'm not sure he was too worried about it.
Yeah.
But we did talk about how small that gap was of $100,000, and Atlanta ended up about spending $100,000 in court fees.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of this pointless back and forth situation where it was unneeded.
Yeah, it's about sending a message to the players that
exactly.
we're in charge and you're not.
Exactly.
In other news of contention in the MLB, Commissioner Rob Manfred finally got more rules in place for pace of play. A general outline of the rules: mound visits are now limited to 6 a game, which I absolutely hate. There's 1 extra visit per extra inning, which I'm fine with. Honestly, I might be fine with 1 visit per inning. I might be okay with that. Between inning timers is limited to 2 minutes and 5 seconds for local games, 2 minutes 25 seconds for national, 2 minutes 55 for tiebreaker and postseason games. There was, I can't find the other part, but yet a lot of players were not happy with this. John Lester of the Cubs, my Cubs. He's kind of what?
He owns a team?
Whoa.
Yes, I own the Cubs.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
John Lester
That is rough.
somewhat firmly in the "get off my lawn" kind of camp. And after that happened, he said, actually before it happened, he said, "I think it's all terrible. The beautiful thing about our sport is there is no time. Fans know what they're getting themselves into when they go to a game. If you want to go to a timed event, go to a timed event," and I entirely agree with that.
Yeah, well, I can see how where the disagreement would come in, but it's just the game's just becoming so long, as we talked about in the past. But yeah, like you said, I do think I do like the in between innings though. I do like that they shortened that, because there's really no reason to take your time in between innings when all you're doing is hopping off into the dugout and coming up to bat. There's really that's become really slow, and I do like at the very end. Found this as well. Pitchers, they must throw the final warm-up by 20 seconds left on that counter, and then the batter by the final warm-up pitch must be walking into the box. So that's cool. I do like, or the circle, pardon me, not necessarily the box, but preparing to get ready and on with the next inning. I actually like the idea, which is obviously a little bit different there. But the reason I say that is because I think that baseball has gotten insanely slow, and there are some times where it is rough. And it's like yesterday, Austin Peay playing Southern Illinois. The game lasted 3 hours and 45 minutes. For 9 hours, or for 9 innings of play.
For 9
hours of play, yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. But no, it's just 3 hours and 45 minutes for a 9-inning baseball game, fellas. That's struggling, and that's a long time.
That is a bit of an outlier, because it was 17-5.
It was 17-6.
17-6. Yeah.
A bit of a walkathon as well, but the point is, it does change things up when you do limit. For me personally, I would have liked the opposite. I actually put something on Twitter not too long ago. I would have actually preferred the opposite. I would have preferred the pitch clock, and then not had the mound visits. I think you should be able to visit as many times as you want, but a pitcher should not be able to walk around the mound 14 times before throwing the next pitch. There was one time yesterday. In that game, I keep using this Austin Peay game as an example because we're so early in the season, that a pitcher went to first 3 times in a row and then walked around the mound twice and then pitched. It was nearly a full minute before we had gotten to the next pitch, and it was just one of those things where it's like, well, in order to actually see action in a baseball game, the baseball has to move at some point. So I would have preferred the pitch clock.
I think a lot of this has to do with just trying to modernize the sport. you have, and Manfred said it's a fan issue, and that's what it's definitely something that he's just trying to make the fans more interested in watching this game on television, in live, in the field. And I think the best way he's trying to come up with it is to just make it quicker and to make it more interesting, where action is constantly happening, and you can watch the game and not necessarily sit there and watch pitchers walk around the mound, or catchers and pitchers having a 10-minute conversation on the mound, and all this other stuff. And so I'm not too upset with the new rules. But I've also said that I think baseball is definitely not a time sport. I think that's part of it. But I believe we should start picking up the pace.
The new rules could have definitely been a lot worse.
Most
in my opinion,
most
worse.
Yes.
But the average game in the MLB last year was 3 hours and 5 minutes. That's pretty much on par with an NFL game.
Yeah, for sure. And the NFL does an outstanding job of making an insanely long game out of a game that shouldn't be.
It's different though, because with football you have a 5-yard run, and then you have 19 different angles that you can replay until the next play. So technically, there might be more downtime in a football game. You could make an argument for that.
You absolutely could.
I know there was a New York Times or Post article that said there was about 11 minutes.
Yeah, it's nearly 12 minutes of actual ball movement, so that's a little bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, and you could argue the same about baseball. And it's just, I'm a part of the team. I know we've discussed this, that I love the downtime. I think that it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Before we head to break, I saw something I thought worth mentioning for your sake. Manfred was recently quoted saying, "We've had 2 great World Series in a row."
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, he's a Royals fan.
Yes,
and the Royals were in the World Series the 2 years before the past 2 years. So that was a pretty fun shot.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Thanks. You know what? I'm changing my opinion now. It's slightly.
You don't like him
slightly
now.
changed.
Okay. More on the lineup after this.
One hit high and deep. Back to the end zone. Brown got it. Moore drives inside. Put it up. See this one. Swung and missed it.
Now Smith again. Block point tech.
Nice turnaround by Johnson. Near post. Kick in.
Any place, anytime. Find it here. The OVC Digital Network.
How will you lead to a better future? Will you lead through life-changing innovations? Or will your leadership shine through the quality of your work? Success is defined by the individual. So it's time to think about the person you want to be and where you will learn to lead through excellence. It's time to become a governor at Austin Peay.
Welcome back to the lineup. In recent years, a decent amount of teams have gone to 6-man pitching rotations, if even for a short time. Now the Angels, with the fresh signing of Shohei Ohtani, are moving to a 6-man rotation in order to ease him more into the American style of baseball and get him used to that more easily. There's a lot of advantages to having a 6-man rotation, but there's also disadvantages. Some people think it's just not the way baseball should be because, baseball fans are incredibly unlikely to accept any change at all. But I like the idea of 6-man pitching rotations. It does eliminate a bullpen or a bench spot, but it eases the burden on your pitchers, which there are a lot of young pitchers in the game today. The Mets went to it recently. The Cubs were actually considering it for a bit. The Giants went to it for a bit. It's a back and forth, it's what you think it adds versus what you think it takes away.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. Right off the bat, it sounds good. Did a little, you look into it a little further, and there may be some starters that don't necessarily like it, especially because that takes away from playing time in some cases, but it brings back a little bit of health. That being said, the biggest thing that I think about it is the way that pitchers pitch now. They're being asked to throw so hard for a short period of time rather than throw about 80% for 9 innings. A lot of pitchers would pitch multiple games. You look back statistically, especially when baseball was really starting to get big, and a lot of those pitchers would pitch 9-inning games just over and over and over again. Now, guys are being asked to just throw as hard as you can for this short period of time, and sometimes it's not even an inning. It just depends on what team it is and how important that pitcher is to them. So I'm not sure how I feel about it in terms of like or dislike it, but I do think it's good that teams are starting to move that way.
Something I think you were right 100% about health-wise. You know, it gives these pitchers a chance to not have to throw as hard for so many times or less amount in a game. You know, you can bring in another pitcher. Another thing, it gives another guy in the bullpen a chance to get out and actually show the team what he can do. You know, we talk all about this spring training stuff, and if you make it through spring training, you get on the team. In the real MLB game is where you're going to be able to show these coaches what you can do, is where you're going to be able to shine. And I think this gives opportunities for other players to get out there and prove to a team that, hey, I'm here, I can do this. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the biggest advantages for me anyway, seeing it. I think just giving the smaller guy a chance.
Yeah.
It gives that one or number two starter from AAA a chance to make it in the majors because there's another spot for him in rotation.
Yeah, and does that? But the question is, does that affect the bench spot then? You know, does that affect that one other guy that you could have had on the bench there, or where does that play?
In the American League, I think it's less of an ordeal than it is in the National League, because in the National League you have to pinch hit, but in the American League, you know, you can just throw out whoever you want. You don't have to worry about pinch hitting, and we could go into that.
Could.
MLB Network released their top 100 players in the game today, and certain picks may have seemed a bit strange. So we're going to talk about that, and you actually didn't even make a list because you're in a completely different camp of you don't think you can really rank players.
Yeah, I think it's tough to rank a player based on a lot. I don't think that it just has to do with a statistical category. I don't think that it only has to do with the team they play for. A lot of it, to me, it could just be right place, right time, and then how they are under pressure as well. You know, you talked about guys coming up into the major leagues, and when they come to the major leagues, like, how do they perform versus how they were in college, and maybe not playing in front of a crowd like that, maybe not playing under the pressure like that. But you think of guys like maybe even a Mariano Rivera. You know, as Yankee fans loved him because under pressure, he was the kind of guy that could come in and just take care of business, and he did it for a very, very long time. And the biggest thing that I have to do with this year is that we haven't even started, and we already get this list for 2018. And as you guys know, baseball players are rarely that good year after year. So when you're judging a guy based on past statistics, what they expect out of him, that's really hard for me to rank that.
Yeah, like with Aaron Judge, he had a great rookie year, but after that, they have that entire offseason to look at the footage and see why he was succeeding and try and get him out with that. For sure. I see that. I see your point.
For the Atlanta Braves, we had Dansby Swanson. I wouldn't say he had a great first rookie season. However, again, like, he hasn't necessarily progressed much farther than what he performed in his rookie season. And, you know, we definitely hyped him up for the Atlanta Braves, and we definitely are not getting what everyone expected.
Yeah, he's more of a glove first, bat, hope it develops as his
Hopefully
glove
he'll hit
is
the ball
helping the
this
team.
time.
Yeah. You rarely get guys, though, year after year that are just consistently outstanding. They've got that batting average over 300. You know, they do this. Their ERA is outstanding. You know, it's rare to get that kind of consistency in baseball, and it's because of baseball and the sport that it is.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
There's a term, baseball gonna baseball.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what it is, because you never know how the baseball is going to bounce, how it's going to fly, how that curveball is going to break. It might break a little bit more on that one pitch. You just don't know how it's going to go. So there was a lot of interesting picks for MLB Network's top 100. One of the ones that stood out the most to me was Shohei Ohtani is on the list. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, he is billed as the Japanese Babe Ruth. He's the best pitcher in the Japanese league, and he was also one of the best home run hitters, and he decided to come over this year, and with 0 major league outs on his record, he is listed as the 100th best MLB player in the game. So I don't necessarily agree with that. Another one I just thought was kind of odd, and he is on the Cubs, so this is somewhat impartial, but Kyle Schwarber was ranked as the 95th best major league player. I mean, you can argue for his bat. You can. But he's not a positive defensive outfielder at all. His y'all might not know what it is, but he has -9 defensive runs saved, which is terrible. Essentially 0 is average. Anything above it is good, but he is -9, so that's not great at all. So there's, yeah.
And even guys like you take a look at guys like even Bryce Harper, and then obviously the Mike Trout made the #1, like you said. You can say those guys are great. I mean, great is the word. There's no doubt, and consistent, sure, even at that. But once you really start to move down that list, like you said, you mentioned guys in the 90s, that 100th spot. That's when it gets tough. Because my question is then, first of all, you said the guy has 0 major league outs.
Yeah.
So how can you name him in a list of major league players? He may be now, but has he actually been in the game? What's he like? And then my thing is, when you try to rank him, what about under pressure? We always talk about this pressure thing. What about the 9th inning? What about that batting average? Where are they at there? Does that matter in the top 100?
They listed Chris Bryant at #8, the 8th best player in the game. But Chris Bryant has been one of the worst players in the clutch in the how many years has he been here? 2015. Okay, 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. In the 3 years he's been in the league, he's been one of the worst players in the clutch. Late in the game, he just doesn't come through.
Yeah,
for
and that matters for a lot of guys, and that's across every sport. So.
It's hard for baseball. I talked to a fellow baseball fan about this at one point. It's one of the most unfair statistics ever. He brought up the fact that a person can hit a perfectly hit ball straight to left field. Left fielder catches it, you're out, 0 for 1. However, your next guy up to bat hits a dribbler down third base fumbles it, and you're safe at first. Well, he's hitting 1 for 1. And so baseball, it's hard for these statistics, and it's hard. Like we've been talking about, like how it's just so hard to actually pick and determine who goes where and who's actually better. And with baseball, it's definitely in-game moments. I have a hard time picking out 5 players that I can specifically say these are the best 5 players.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just super hard to make that list.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was just what players would I want to build my team around. If I were choosing any one person at this position, what would I do if I had to pick from this list? Who would I pick? Obviously, Trout is #1. You can't get any better than Trout. He's not necessarily the best at anything, but he is either great or very good at everything, which makes him the best player in the MLB, bar none, in my opinion. But I had Kershaw second because I just think you need a pitcher. You just need a good pitcher. Yeah. One of the ones that stood out the most to me on the MLB's list was they had J.D. Martinez at 25. Essentially, he is just a bat. He was in the National League for the second half of last year, but essentially he's just a bat. He doesn't have any defensive capabilities at all, which is why he went to the Red Sox in the American League and is going to be a DH. That's what people assume.
Well, and that's where, once again, where do you draw the line on what really matters, what actually makes you a better player than the next guy? Because, if you're batting, let's say you're batting 323 by the end of the season, the other guy's batting 293, and yet he's playing second base and you're at DH, which one matters more? And then against which team? So those are a lot of things to think about as well. But that's where I'm at on those. I think it's funny. I look at these a lot like I look at preseason rankings. Especially here at Austin Peay. How many in preseason rankings? How many preseason rankings has Austin Peay just blown up this year? Take a look at football, pick to finish second to last. Basketball, pick to finish second to last. Right now they're sitting 3rd or 4th in the OVC, and it's those kind of things that it's tough for me to take these. They're just numbers.
It just doesn't really mean that much. We're going to send it to a break, green light, and talking Tim Tebow on the other side. right, this segment is called Green Light, named after the signal coaches give when the batter has permission to swing away. Essentially, it's our time for general baseball talk, and this week, Tim Tebow is entering his 3rd season as a professional baseball player, which, how?
Come on, man.
I mean, you look, it is a publicity stunt. It 100% is.
It could be.
He is an athlete. He's a great athlete. He is. But he hadn't played baseball since high school. So where's my major league tryout?
Hey, that's a good question. This is a guy, though, that can make things happen. Not very many guys can come in and hit a home run within your first couple of at-bats.
It was his first at-bat.
The very first one.
Yeah.
So, that in itself is kind of impressive. I'm not going to sit here and say he's a fielder, okay? No. He couldn't really throw a football either. That being said, I think that he's still, worth something.
I like the guy. I think.
Yeah.
It's weird because Tim Tebow, I've known Tim Tebow. I've known about Tim Tebow for a while now. I followed him in Florida. So it's cool. It's cool to watch him come up here, and all of a sudden he's turning heads in the baseball world.
It is.
And for him to be successful in NFL, and I still think he's successful because he made it to the NFL, and I think that's about as far as you can go, except for the Super Bowl. So I still consider him successful in the football world. And then to turn around and say, you know what, I think that I can do well in baseball.
Yeah.
And he did. And I think that's wild. Never playing a college game of baseball. You said he came out of high school, football all throughout college, and then just to kind of pick up a bat again. I think it's amazing, and I want him to do well.
Yeah, he had a kind of a workout for MLB Scouts 2016, I think it was. Yeah. And one scout afterwards put simply, he sucked. Yeah. That was all he said, 2 words. Because he's not really legitimate, in my opinion. I mean, we're not bagging him as a person at all.
No,
Obviously, he's a wonderful person, very inspirational to many, many people.
Yeah.
But he had a 222 batting average, a 308 on base percentage, and a 333 slugging percentage. The MLB average, and this is in the MLB facing much better pitching. Yeah. The average was 255. The on base percentage was 325, and the slugging percentage was 426. So he is below average in everything against single A pitchers.
Yeah.
So he's going to make it to the major leagues at some point because they kind of have to.
For sure.
Because that's
agree.
how you're going to get people in the stands.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, absolutely. And the jersey sales alone.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. And when you're talking about a guy who, like you said, that's not even against major league pitchers, but I didn't even expect the guy to come into single A and bat over 200. Personally, I didn't. And then when he did that, I was actually shocked.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of impressive, especially because he's not necessarily the youngest guy in the world. He's sitting right there around his prime right now. There's no doubt about that. But gosh, I got to give the guy credit. Why not try?
Yeah, he's trying.
Why not?
And that was definitely his argument because there's been press conferences with him talking about this whole topic, and he's definitely said, I feel like, I'm not quoting here because I haven't looked at the quote, but he's definitely kind of made it a point to where I would have regretted it if I didn't go out and try.
Yeah.
And hats off to him for trying and making it this far, especially coming out of football.
And you also have to give him credit. Lastly, I know that we're getting close, but you got to give him credit because he's a guy that it's not for the money. He's literally pushing. I mean, he's trying. He's working at it. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah. And the day that he signed with the Mets, he had the best-selling Mets jersey. We have reached the end of the lineup. For Christensen and Jeffrey Matthews, I am Joshua Adams. Thank you for watching, and see you again next week.